Welcome everyone to our fifth off the shelf, or I'm sorry, off the shelf. Oh my gosh, I've already started awful. All right, let's start again. Rewind. All right. All right, my name is Renee Ryan. My cohort is Barbara Wallace. This is Off the Shelf. It is our broadcast that we go live weekly and step into the story, just talk books. We have this amazing author that has decided to join us today, and we thank you so much, Christina Clancy. And you go by Christy, right?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
When I published my first book, my editor said, "Is it okay if we call you Christina? Because Christy sounds too youthful." And I was like, I didn't think youth would be a problem. So,
yeah,
sure.
All right. Well, Christina, we, this is, she's the author of Shoulder Season, and I have just been dying to pick your brain about this book. I loved it. I adored it. I read it, and then I also was able to listen to the audio version. Loved that version as well. Your narrator was amazing. So Christina, you are the author of The Second Home, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Your work has appeared in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, the Sun magazine, and in various library journals, including Glimmer Train and Hobart. And you hold a PhD, is that correct, in creative writing from the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee.
I'm a doctor.
Which we're very jealous of.
Go Badgers. Go Badgers. As somebody who is an adopted Wisconsinian, I love to see that. And I love that you are from this area and you come at us with a lot of credentials. I'm so excited to get started. Barb, do you want to do a quick introduction of yourself, and then we'll hear a little bit more about Christy?
Okay. I'm Barb Wallace, as Renee said. I'm her cohort. I am a former romance writer. I sold over 1 million books worldwide, and I'm in the middle of a pivot to historical fiction. Very much looking forward to Shoulder Season because I was a class of 82. So it really hit home. A lot of the things you wrote about hit home.
Awesome. Yes.
Oh, I apologize. I said I was going live at 12:30. So that's when my husband decided to make lunch out just nearby. So.
All right, I don't hear it, so that's good.
He's eating his lunch.
Well, yeah. Hi, Pete. Somewhere in there. Okay, well, Christy, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to just dig in because we are a little bit on a time crunch here. We're only going to go 45 minutes. And so let's hear a little bit about yourself. How did you get into this? What's your background? And when did you I know you have your PhD. I would love to hear how that all came about. Have you always been a writer? Just kind of give us a little insight into who you are.
Oh, sure. Well, I do think I've always been a writer. I've always been a reader. That's for sure. I'm actually doing an event at a library tonight. And I was thinking about how when I was a kid, I'd always go to the library with a big brown bag and just fill it with books. And my sisters also were big readers. We were just readers in our family, and we'd have reading competitions to see who could read the most. And of course, I couldn't really even understand a lot of what I was reading because I was just trying to read fast and read above my level when I was younger. But I think that really set the stage for me wanting to become a writer, because I think when you're looking for a lot of books, you sometimes want the book that you wish you could find on the shelves. And so I think writing a book is a way to put that book there. That would be the book I'd want to read. So I didn't always write fiction, though. When I was in college, I majored in English, but I had a hard time with plot because I thought that plot had to be really complicated and involve like somebody getting the wrong briefcase at the airport and all of this mayhem that results. And so I went into corporate work. I worked in marketing for a software company, and then I worked for IBM doing communications and writing for them. And then when my kids were little, I wanted to start writing again. And a friend of mine introduced me to Lori Moore. And I read some of her speaking of Madison writers, and I read some of her short stories, and they really helped me think, well, maybe I can actually write, because her plots, almost nothing happens. Those are the kinds of stories that I really liked, actually, where the change is, like as Henry James would say, like a key change from major to minor. You don't have to have something really major happen. So I started working on short stories. eventually left IBM. And then I decided to get a MA in English, which is a terminal degree. It really didn't do anything for me at the time. It didn't even help me get a teaching job in high school, like if I wanted to teach high school English. So I just kind of had the bug. I really liked writing, and I liked the classes I was taking. And it's unusual, but in Milwaukee, the UW Milwaukee is one of the few programs that offers a PhD in creative writing. I think there's only 7 universities in the country that offer PhDs in creative writing. And I really liked it because it was really supportive. It didn't feel super competitive. Like all the people there were really nurturing and were excited when you had things go well for you. Like my very first story was accepted in Glimmer Train when I was getting my PhD. And I felt like people weren't like, oh, so you hear stories about like other, like Iowa Writers Workshop, where
right.
success, other people are kind of jealous of it or whatever. That's not fair. That was a long time ago that I heard those stories. So that might not be the case now. But anyway, I really loved being there, especially because I was a non-traditional student. I was raising my kids. I already had this career. My kids were little. So I was kind of squeezing everything in. And then I started teaching at Beloit College. And in order to get to finish my PhD and really, I felt at the time, be considered a real writer, I felt like I had to have a book, and short stories weren't enough. So for my PhD, I finished a very bad book that was like my learning book. And
we all have those.
We all have one of those. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because we can be hard on ourselves for writing these books that never see the light of day when we think of all the time and effort we put into them. But you learn so much from writing them. And then, so I did enough to get my PhD to write that bad book. And then I started working on The Second Home, which was my debut. And one of my friends said, your second book often becomes your first book. And I really took that to heart. That was my mantra for a long time. So I also, I've been thinking about this lately. I kind of miss writing the way I did before I had actually sold a book, because I was writing like it was a hobby. Like it was just something I loved to do. I felt so called to do. I didn't feel any pressure. It was just the story I couldn't wait to tell. And because I was a professor, I couldn't do a lot of writing during the school year. Like my brain just doesn't go that way where I can work on that and grade papers and plan classes. So it was just something that I kind of picked on. And then about a year before I actually sold it, I got really serious about it. And I just devoted that whole year to just digging in and making this story come together. And I didn't think it would actually sell. I never imagined that it would get picked up, but it sold quickly, and it came out last year in June. And then Shoulder Season, I was on a 2-book contract. So I had to write Shoulder Season, and then that came out in July of this year, which I still cannot believe I've written 2 books.
So do you think that your credentials helped open those doors? Do you think, or do you think just that, I think, were you teaching writing? Did I catch that? You were a professor teaching writing? Is that correct?
Yeah, I was teaching writing, but I go back and forth on that question. I used to think that, sometimes I'd feel frustrated with my PhD because the academic market is really tough and you don't get paid a lot, and it's, adjuncting and a big commute. And sometimes I would think about how I left IBM to do that, and had I made a bad decision, because I could have advanced in my other career in all the years that I spent working on my PhD, which got me a job that didn't really pay very well, and so on. But I think my PhD helped in a lot of other intangible ways. Like one is that, first of all, it just kept my head in writing and good writing and studying and thinking really hard and talking about literature with my students. So I think that helped a lot. It also allowed me to meet people and stay really active in the writing community. And I think that helped a lot. When I sold The Second Home, I was able to get blurbs from writers that I had, interacted with as a professor, like Rebecca Mackay, for example. I'd met her because we were both in the same literary journal. We did an event together. And then I was able to get her to come to Beloit to work as one of our fellows. So we got to spend some time together and talk about the book. So when I think they were coming out with a second home, it helped that book get more attention because Rebecca, who is a nominee for the Pulitzer Prize and is amazing for The Great Believers, she endorsed it. And through Rebecca, I also met Chloe Benjamin, who wrote The Immortalists, and she also, blurbed the book. And I think it just, it helps to be part of a writing community. You don't have to get a PhD. You don't have to teach, but go to every event you can with a writer, interact with writers, do things in that world, keep reading scholarly literature about writing and keep upping your game and challenging yourself. So you're not just reading the books that are easy for you and that fall right in your wheelhouse, but that make you want to do something or stretch a little. And I think that's what helped as far as, getting, maybe it helped. I mean, I'm sure it maybe gave me a little more credibility, especially if they saw I was in the New York Times, or maybe that PhD helped.
Well, it's kind of funny because we actually, this week, we're talking about the whole needing to continue learning. A friend of ours wrote a long post about it, about how she knows people we all know people who think that they've done all the learning and now they don't have to learn anymore. And we were talking about how important it is you have to. But going back to the PhD thing, I have another friend who was nominated for a very prestigious award in the romance community at one time. And she said she felt after that she was hamstrung for many, many books because she felt that she had to live up to that standard. So did you kind of feel hamstrung a little bit that you had to live up to the academic PhD standard, or did you just feel like, no, I'm just going to write my book?
No, I just wanted to write my book. Yeah, I never really thought of my PhD. It's funny because I think the PhD sounds like, it sounds really impressive to say that. But it's not as it's not a small thing to get a PhD. I don't mean to minimize it. It's cool that I did that, but I was also lucky that I could do that. It's expensive to get a PhD. Like it's definitely a financial sacrifice to do that. So I was lucky that I could in the first place. But it's you can do the same work that you would get a PhD for. Sorry, there's a lawnmower next door. But you can just engage in that on your own as long as you put the time and effort into it.
That isn't a really good point. One of the things that I noticed, two things I wanted to comment, going back to plot, how you had said you always thought that it needed to be super complicated. One of the early lessons I learned, and I think I learned it from writing romance, was that the best books have a simple plot, complicated characters. And that has always resonated with me. I've always tried to keep the plots very streamlined and then give you a super complicated onion layer after layer after layer of a character. And I feel like we're going to get to shoulder season very quickly here soon, but I feel like you really did nail that with your main character in shoulder season, was that you had this very complicated character. And I love that. I know a lot of people, because I did teach high school for years. My master's degree is in economics and in religious studies. And I always said I'm a published author because I didn't know any better, because I always laughed about how everyone that I know that has these English degrees, and especially higher level English degrees, they get in their own way because they're so convinced that every word has to be excellent and everything. They really do get in their own way, and they're shooting for, like you said, the Pulitzer Prize, like your friend, or they're shooting for to become a literary giant. When people like me, with my economics background, and I was teaching AP economics, AP American government, and Latin, I didn't know what I didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. And I was blissfully ignorant about writing in general, plotting. I was super ignorant about the industry, and I just sort of fell into it. And yet also, when I started getting rejections, because unlike you, I did not sell my first book or my second or my third. And with all those rejections, what ended up happening was I said, okay, something has to change here. I clearly need to figure out what I'm not doing right, what I am doing right. Barb and I, when we were neophytes in this business, they had a lot of contests that you could enter and get free, what was it, $15, $20 to enter a contest of your first
you got one more
pages.
feedback.
And you could get really great feedback, but also if you were a finalist and you got in front of an editor and you got free feedback from the editors. And I started seeing the same old thing. And by the way, plot was one of my issues too. And I started going to workshops, and I didn't go to, because I'd heard really bad things about how the literary community doesn't like genre fiction writers, and they will try to get you to not write genre fiction, and they'll really ridicule you. So I was like, well, I'm not going to go that direction. So I just learned from the greats. I sat at the feet of New York Times bestselling authors. I sat at the feet at people who are on their 100th book, and that kind of thing, and really, really studied the craft. So I feel like I have a PhD in creative writing, and yet I don't have a single credit to my name.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. Like, you can, if you put the time and the effort into your craft, it's kind of like getting a PhD. The PhD just gives you more structure, and you also get feedback because you get to have professors read your work. But, it's interesting. I think I'm really lucky that I found a publisher that was willing to publish my books as literary fiction. And I said to my editor when the second home was coming out, because that's partially set in Cape Cod, I said, for the cover, I just don't want Adirondack chairs or flip-flops, because I did not write this book as a summer beach read. Right. But at the same time, I don't mind, you want your books to sell because you want people to read them. I have no chip on my shoulder about being like high art literary, or, I feel like I don't mind being a commercial writer at all. And the thing that would be a mortal blow to me, though, is if people said like, these books are badly written, and I don't see that, and which is good, so I think that I wanted to have good writing that's engaging, but I didn't want the writing to be navel-gazy or get in the way of me telling a story. Not that all literary fiction is like that. It's definitely not. But, I was very focused. I mean, I don't mind that my books are considered commercial. That's just, I'm not snobby about things. But
I thought your book was, well, it's commercial. It did lean towards the literary side.
Yes, the voice.
I would agree with Barnes & Noble, since being a published author makes no money, as we all know. So, and there was the really super literary books. You can tell the difference. There isn't as much. Put back up here. You had a plot that moved forward, and there was a pacing to it that commercial fiction has, which is an engaging pacing. That's why people like to read commercial fiction, because it is something that keeps them wanting to know what happens next. Literary fiction frequently, in the stuff I've read, and maybe I'm just not reading the right stuff, is much slower and not necessarily looking to turn pages as much as to have you fall in love with the language. And it isn't, like you said, it's not a beach read. But I also think Shoulder Season, while it wasn't a beach read, was very readable. Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, and that's my own criteria. Like, when I think of books I love, I want to be able to write, underline some sentences that just blow me away. Yep. Or you have some idea that's put forth where you're like, oh my gosh, I never really saw the world this way. This is great. And there's moments of introspection, but then things keep moving along. Like, I just read a book that just totally blew me away recently, was The Sea Wife by Amity Gage. Have you guys ever read that?
Heard of it.
Oh my gosh. It was so great because the language was absolutely stunning. She's a professor at Yale, but it was completely suspenseful too. And it's a meditation on marriage and risk taking and, raising children. And it was everything I love in a book. Another book that's kind of, commercial, but also literary that I love is The Knockout Queen by Ruthie Thorpe. Or Julia Johnson, her books, especially like Be Frank with Me and Better Luck Next Time. Those have that nice balance. The Guncle.
I just read The Guncle. I just love The Guncle. So good. All right. Yes. So let's get to a book that I found very, very readable. And let's talk about Shoulder Season. Here it is. So to our viewers and listeners, this is the book. And when did it come out? Just came out. It's pretty recent.
July 6th.
July. Okay. Yeah. So Shoulder Season by Christina. We're going to use your real name on this one. Christina Clancy. She goes by Christy. And if you look at it, Annie McDonald was the one that suggested this to us, because originally she was going to be with us today. And hi, Annie. I'm sorry you can't be here. I say to all my book influencers that Barb and I invite, I give them the option to pick the book. And so this was the book that she picked. And I went in blind. I had no idea what this book was about, but I knew Annie, and I was like, you know what? I trust her. Let's do it. Let's read this book. And I'm so glad that I took this leap of faith. And so let's talk a little bit about this. And also, I'm looking at the picture, and if you look at the heroine on the front, she's got the back to the camera, so that gives us a hint that there's some sort of a historical time period in here. But it's not historical. We're talking 1980s, right? 81.
1981, yep.
1981, which I can totally relate to that era. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but yeah.
If we lived it, it's not historical fiction.
Yeah, that's what we say. If you lived it, it's not historical fiction. It's just history in your own world. And so anyway, there's a key element here that you have to look at to see what this book is about. And so let's talk about this cover. So how much did you have say on the cover?
I had, I don't know how much say I actually had. They always phrase it like, we want you to love it. And, but I think ultimately it's their decision. But fortunately, I was insane for that cover.
I love it.
Make a few changes. So the book is about a former Playboy bunny, because there used to be a Playboy resort in Wisconsin, of all places, right in farmland, from 1968 or 60, I think 68 to 82. The numbers are different, like different people tell you different dates when they opened and closed. But anyway, I wanted to write about that. And the thing that was challenging, speaking of literary fiction, this goes right in, this dovetails into what we were talking about. Because it's about a Playboy bunny, it's challenging to market, because there is so much stigma attached to Playboy, and we didn't want it to look like it was a super light, fluffy cover, which, I mean, really, when you think about it, how come, since Playboy's been around forever, it's a ubiquitous part of our culture, how come I'm the first person to write a character that's ever worked there? And I feel like the book, some people will think, oh, I don't want to read a book about a Playboy bunny. And I'm like, check your feminism.
Right.
If you don't want to read about a woman's experience working for Playboy, how feminist are you? Because it challenges everything we know about what it's like to be a woman. And that was part of what I wanted to write about.
I love that.
So anyway, they weren't sure for the cover how much Playboy they wanted it to be. Like, did they want it to be Playboy? So originally, Sherry's figure had straps.
Okay.
She didn't have a bow tie. And she looked like a dancer. I think it looked like she was wearing pearls, I think, or something in the original version. So we took off the straps, and then we made it that very subtle bow tie. And then she started to look more like a Playboy. And I just loved it, because you can't tell, is she putting her hair up or taking it down? Like, is she about to have some fun and party, or is she about to go to work? And then also just the bubbles in the background looks so exciting, like she's on the edge of something. And this is a coming of age story, so I think that's appropriate. I'll tell you two things about the book that are surprises. One is, sorry, Barbara.
The funny thing is, I stared at this book for a long time before I bought it, because it was on the shelves. I'm going to be the one that confesses, I did not know it was about Playboy, even though I stared at it forever. I thought she was wearing an evening gown. And I'd never heard the phrase shoulder season, which I was told by somebody this weekend that I'm an idiot, because everyone knows what shoulder season means.
No, like half the people know.
And I'm like, no, I don't think so. I'm from like a little small town. We didn't have a shoulder season, but I was still drawn by the cover, because I was drawn by her and her bright red hair.
Yeah, I think it's so, I love it. And the texture of the paper, I wish everyone could feel it. It's kind of gritty. And I was talking to, I know the cover designer, she's wonderful. And she designed like Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides and stuff. So she's like my dream cover designer. And I said, people really are commenting a lot about the texture of the cover, because it's gritty feeling. And she said, oh, it's supposed to feel like a resort matchbook. Isn't that cool?
Love that.
And there's also a bunny hidden on the cover, because Hugh Hefner used to hide bunnies on the cover of Playboy magazine. So at your leisure, you can see if you can find the bunny.
Oh, Nick. Okay. Yeah. I'm not going to do that now, but oh my gosh.
Yeah, I had my back to you the whole time while I stared, but now I know what I'll do.
I wish you guys could see the new cover. I don't have it for the paperback. They totally changed the cover. They're leaning away from Playboy and moving more into like summer. And I love the paperback cover too. If you go to my Facebook author page, Christina Clancy, you'll see, I just posted it recently. And
I'll link from the Step Into the Story. I'll link over there so that our viewers can go over there and look at it.
Oh, great. Thanks. Yeah, I love it. But it's interesting to see what they're leaning into and what they think works. And, I think they think maybe they'll get different readers with a different kind of cover. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Well, it's so funny because I bought this book for my daughter, who is, she's a nurse and she's a mother of 2 and young ones, 2 and 4, and she's getting her nurse practitioner. And I said, you need to read this book because you need to know what life was like in the 80s. And you nailed it, Christy. You totally nailed it. The lackadaisical, I don't know, I guess recreational drugs, how just rampant drug use was and how it was just accepted. I love that you put Greg Allman in your book because I grew up near where he grew up. And cool. And I grew up in a city where Leonard Skinner, it was like Southern rock. And so he, all of those big time rock stars, those Southern rock stars, they also were such a part of my 70s and 80s childhood into, before the 80s got into that weird, the whatever it is, the headbands and, the hairbands. That was part of that time period. And so I just wanted to just kind of gush. And I told my daughter, I said, it's like autobiographical. No, I wasn't a bunny, but I was telling Barb, I was in, at college and I was president of my sorority, but I was also a cheerleader. And so I could really feel like she was so naive, your heroine, so naive. And yet also we all went away from home. And it makes sense because she didn't have, she was an orphan, but all of us, when we left at 17 and 18, we were so unprepared and naive. And there was such rampant recreational drug use, so much partying. I mean, partying, all you have to do is look at those 80s, like 16 Candles, about how parties were just such, and they were wild parties, were such a part of the fabric of being that, of coming of age at that time.
Oh yeah. Remember going to the bars and dancing on the bar?
Yep.
At the end of the night, like it wasn't fun. And I grew up in Milwaukee, which is definitely like there's a corner tavern on every, every block. But we really did party pretty hard. And I'm a little younger than Sherry, my character, would be when she becomes a bunny. She's 19 when she gets her first job, but she has a very stunted adolescence because she wasn't able to enjoy it. She was taking care of her sick mom and her dad had died. So she didn't get to have any of the fun that all of her friends were having. So by the time she's a bunny, which is a pretty aggressive place to grow up fast, but you're right. I think that, it's really fascinating with this book. I feel like people like my age and older totally get it. And they recognize the way we would fail. I feel like younger readers, it's kind of interesting. Like The Atlantic just had an article about New Puritanism and how younger people are becoming kind of puritanical, which I don't mean to sound like I'm insulting younger readers, not that at all. But I do think that they're less tolerant of people making mistakes.
Right.
Screwing up. The whole reason I wrote this book is because I wanted to feature a woman who made mistakes and screwed up. She was myopic. She was making decisions at a time when there was no social media, when she didn't have anyone to guide her way. And I wanted to think, well, how does that sit with you for 10, 20, 30, 40 years? Because my own experience aging is that things that I did when I was younger, like you think you're just going to leave them in the past, but they bug you. They like tickle your brain every now and then. You'll think about something you did or someone you hurt or like a mistake you'd made. And it's just like, almost like you just made it, and how do you let go of those mistakes? So I feel like younger readers are a little less tolerant. Like they really want their character to be likable. And they have role models that we didn't have. I mean, if you think about, growing up during this time period, I've kind of gotten into listening to Rob Lowe's podcast, literally, because that's, I grew up watching the Brat Pack, the Brat Pack, and I grew up with those characters. I mean, that was my generation growing up.
And he talked about how the Brat Pack, they were the first, like, what you would call young adult actors, and they were in their late teens and 20s getting jobs, and those were our role models. And if you look back at those movies, we didn't have, you're right, there wasn't sort of that, we were taught right and wrong, but we weren't taught, and we were taught very strong morals. I mean, I think very, very strong right and wrong and morals, but we weren't given, from my experience and from most of my friends, we weren't given really like the roadmap of how do you then go out in the world and deal with it and use what you've learned, because it was a lot of do what I say, not what I do. And, you know, and so there was just a lot of floundering. And you're right, with social media, you flounder, it's plastered across everywhere, no matter how old you are. I'm looking at what happened to Urban Meyer after the weekend, after Sunday. And it's like everybody knows everything within seconds of it happening. And I think there's a hindrance there of being too open with your wildness, I guess.
I think it was a time where kids were doing stuff. And I think that the parental generation, like my parents, they were a little bit older, but I was growing up in that time, and we were doing a lot of stupid things. And we were very open about what stupid things we were doing. I mean, my yearbook has pictures of people drinking beer at a party. And, you know,
well, I think the drinking age was 18 at the time.
No, well,
19. It was 18.
19. But the thing is, we lived next door to a state where it was 18. It was 20, I think, in Massachusetts. We could go buy legally at 18 in Vermont, so we would travel over. But my point is that parents didn't stop to think that that's what kids were doing. At least my parents, they seemed very naive about doing it. Or they went through the 70s and they figured because we were settled down from the 70s, things were okay. Like, oh, well, they're not out protesting the war and going crazy and smoking pot and dropping LSD, so things must be good. They didn't realize we just switched to marijuana and beer.
And cocaine was like cocaine. All the bunnies I talked to. And, you know, I think, though, I've been actually wanting to write an essay about this. You know, I think because we have generations of people now who grew up with the internet, like, I don't think younger people really know or understand like what it really means to be naive. You know? I mean, I think that they just don't understand how you can't not know about people. You know, like there's a twist at the end of my book, and I can't say what it is, but there's a really big twist at the end.
No, and I have a question about that after.
Yeah. And I always can tell when someone's read the whole thing because that kind of you know, there's a twist. But somebody I was at a book club, and I don't read my Goodreads reviews, but somebody said, do you know that if you sign on to Goodreads, the very first thing you see is questions. And one of the questions is, why didn't Sherry just Google? You know, and you'll know what I'm talking about when you read it. And people are like, there was no Google. There was no way to look people up. You didn't know. You just trusted people. And you could get in all kinds of situations. And when you think about it, like Sherry gets into situations that, you know, I mean, I don't know if she had to go back in time and live them over again, if she'd even change it. You know, you learn a lot.
You know what you know. Yeah.
And some of her mistakes actually ended up paying off for her. You know, if she had known better, she wouldn't have done some of the things that she did that worked in her favor. But there's one major tragedy at the center of the book. Again, I can't tell you very much about that. But
shocking. It was shocking. I mean, it brought tears to my eyes. It was very shocking. And then the twist was very shocking. And we're going to get to that we're going to be very, very careful not to give spoilers. But I think Barb wanted to ask you about that from author to author, because one of the things that Barb and I talk about all the time is author choices. You know, once you make a choice as an author, you have to be brave with that choice and go all the way with it. And so take it away, Barb. Oh,
okay. Well, no, backing up, you sort of answered the question, but there's a point in the book where she has her come to Jesus moment is actually off stage. Before we have there's a time shift, and there's a very clear come to Jesus moment that she does explain that she had. And I was curious, what made you decide to have it off stage and cut there and have to do some backstory versus letting us see her have that come to Jesus moment on the stage? You know,
I'm not 100% sure that I know which come to Jesus. I think it's when
right before the
she
time
kind of
shift
gets her
to the
act
last
together.
year. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
No.
we jump ahead. So there was a point where she finds out some information, and then off the page, we hear she really got her act together. And and I was wondering why you chose to do it off the page rather than on the page.
It was actually originally on the page, and honestly, it was boring.
Okay, well, there's an answer.
It was just boring to me. It was. I felt like I was just going. Whenever I'm writing and I'm bored with my own writing, it's usually because I'm telling the story, and it's just, and then this happened, and then that happened, and then that happened, and I hate that. Yeah, so I just try to, whenever I'll feel it myself, and I'm like, the reader doesn't need to know all this. Like all they need to know is this basic idea that Sherry, and I don't think I'm giving anything away because there's a prologue. At a certain point, Sherry gets her act together.
Right.
And so again, like I said too, maybe I didn't need that because it's in the prologue. So you know that she's going to be okay, like that things are going to work out for her.
Because she's an adult. Right.
Yeah, but that whole middle part, I think some readers feel like it's a little rushed. To me,
I didn't think it was rushed at all.
It felt obligatory to explain exactly what happened in the 30 years or 40 years or whatever in between. Like all you need to know are the jumping off point, and then coming back to to East Troy. So I don't know. It was really interesting to write that way, and structurally, you guys know as writers, it's really hard to structure a novel. And again, like I just was trying to avoid that, and then.
Right. Well, and you said that it was very much you wanted to show something haunts you for 40 years.
Yeah.
So you would have to jump ahead. So,
right. Yeah.
So you did sort of partially answer my question earlier of why you did that big jump, but
yeah. That's exactly what I was trying to do.
I think what I love about your type of book, and Barb and I, again, we come from romance. Our roots are in romance, and in romance, there's very much, regardless of how many romance authors will tell you differently, there's very much a formula in terms of structure. This has to happen by the first 10% of the book. This has to happen by the next 25%. By the 50%, you have the major turning point. You have I call it the black moment, the breakup by the 75% point. And then you have the resolution and the epilogue, or, the living happily ever after. And the one thing that I've noticed is, now that I have also done my career pivot and I'm not writing romance anymore, one of the things that I love and also am challenged by is the lack of that formula, is to know that, the story informs the story, and there's not a plug it in to, the we call them turning points. It's truly saying you have to go by your instincts. And this goes back to the question of author making choices, and you made some real interesting choices. It just in general with your heroine. And one of the things I really loved about the book was how it truly was what I felt a coming of age, even though a lot of times you think of coming of age as being a little younger. I like that she's 19 coming of age, because I feel like that's when this generation came of age. We did not have, I think the newer generation they have their coming of age, or whatever term you want to use, their maturation much younger, I think, because of the internet. And now it's like back then you were sort of thrown into the deep end, and then you had to figure it all out. And I loved how she made bad choices when it came to some of her friends. Some of the friends ended up being better than others. And I loved Val. I loved how that particular friendship arc was really nice, and that it's a book that you have to read all the way to the end, because some of the stuff that you're like, oh, Sherry, what is wrong with you?
Oh, there's some cringeworthy moments where you're like, no, don't do this.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, don't argue. But at the same time, I remember making a really bad decision in college. And I remember this guy said to me, for being a smart person, you are really stupid. And I feel like this is Sherry. She's brilliant, but she makes some really bad decisions. And that's that, what is it? She lacked emotional maturity and emotional intelligence, but she was very intelligent. And sometimes when you're an intelligent person and you don't have emotional intelligence, that's when really bad things happen. And I loved how you did not pull any punches and you put her through the ringer. I hate to say that, but you know, a good novel is always that what's the worst thing that can happen to your character, and you make it happen, and you did it over and over again. So I thought that was great.
Well, oh, sorry, Barbara.
I was going to say, I think that one of the things that made it unique is that when you talk about a lot of books, say she has to go back and rectify her past mistake. You gave her a pretty damn big, wide path of damage that she caused before she left. It wasn't like a little, oh, I'm going to clear this up with a conversation. She ruined some lives. I mean, she made some huge mistakes and ruined some lives. And it was a lot of damage. There was not just a little mistake that she was like, oh, I mean, this was major.
Although I like, one thing I was just thinking as you were saying that is, she didn't really do that much in a way. You know, it's just like this bad luck thing that happened that was really consequential. You know, and it's kind of like, it wouldn't have happened if Sherry had made different decisions, but it also was just kind of a random arbitrary act, like the big tragedy.
And it's not like she made that person make the decision to, I'm going to use the word, I'm again trying not to show off, you know, to join in. And it's the old, you know, there was no gun to the head.
Yeah.
And so I think I see what you're saying, but I also see that she was also very persuasive. And then when you find out the character's true character, you're like, oh, well, I'm surprised that didn't happen sooner.
Yeah. Like the person involved had something to do with his own situation. And I don't want to say any more than that, but
no, so hard to deal with a twist. Yeah.
Yeah. And Sherry's kind of a bad friend to her friend.
Yeah.
And she, you know, speaking of Greg Allman, again, I don't want to say very much about it, but like it's so funny because people get so mad at Sherry for that. And
I was furious with her.
Yeah.
Absolutely furious.
It's so funny though, because I'm like, people read books about murder, kidnapping, rape, like all these horrible things. So like when you put what Sherry did in the context of all those, you know, horrible things, it's not that bad. But I think there's so much buildup and there's so much around that it feels really momentous. Like, how can you do that?
I also think it cuts home because most of us haven't murdered somebody, we hope, but most of us have either betrayed or been betrayed by someone we really cared about.
Right. And especially
so when it happens, it brings that back.
And women make bad decisions when men are involved.
Always.
Friends, I've been a bad friend to my friend when I've had a guy who could be like, if I could do something with a guy who I had a really big crush on, I was not always the best friend to my friends. Sorry, friends who were watching. And I've had friends who've let me down when they've gotten involved with a guy because it just takes over your whole life. And, you know, especially in those days, you know, that era.
I always say we are one bad boyfriend away from jail.
Nothing she did was unrealistic. That's what they were, just bad decisions after bad decisions, but they weren't unrealistic. I knew people that made a lot of those same choices.
Right. She's like, her decisions, we talk about them like they're so awful, yet in some ways they're kind of pedestrian. She just pays a really high price for the choices.
But then the bad boyfriend that we thought was going to be the bad boyfriend ended up being somewhat redeemed a lot. And I liked how you did that. And, you know, I also love how even your decent characters still have flaws. And I think that's very, very strong storytelling. Again, coming back from the romance genre, we're always told, it is banged into our head, your characters have to be sympathetic, which really is code for they have to be likable, which means even when they do bad things, it can't be too bad. Yeah. And when they're doing bad things, they have to be good in their head, you know? And so I feel like that has really, for me personally as an author, somewhat crippled me in terms of writing a story that I really want to tell. And so I felt really free reading your book. So that was very, very, it was wonderful.
It's also trained readers, I think, to expect that. And it makes me kind of sad that readers think that you have to have this totally likable character. I mean, I like Sherry, but I know she's frustrating. And I think some people like her less because she makes some bad decisions. To me, it just makes her seem more
sympathetic. To me, the word is sympathetic, not likable. And at the end, sympathetic is more interesting and a stronger heroine in the long run.
Yeah, and also for the men. So I have J. Ryan Straddle, who he wrote Lager Queen in Minnesota and Kitchens of the Great Midwest. He's just a wonderful guy. But when he was reading a very early draft of The Second Home, there's a character as a villain in that book named Anthony, and he said to me, he said, I think you want to flesh out the evil character a little more. Right now he feels like a little bit like a straw man. Yeah. And so I did. He's still evil incarnate. Like he's still awful, but I tried to make him a little bit more fleshed out. And then it's interesting because of that. That's why I sold the book for TV, because that is the character that Nikolai Coster-Waldau from Game of Thrones wants to play, because he thinks that he was looking for a character kind of like Nicole Kidman's husband in Big Little Lies, who's Andrew Skarsgård's character, who's evil, but yet you're kind of drawn into him. And I guess he was looking for a character like that. And that's why he picked my book as his book. So, I think that paid off for The Second Home, but it also is something I was very mindful of when I was working on Shoulder Season, is to really develop not just the female characters, even though I'm telling a story of what it's like to be a woman inhabiting a woman's body in a place where you're looked at and the male gaze is defining you. But all these women were living in a dorm. They were struggling with friendships and learning about what it meant to be a good or bad friend, and learning about the world through each other. So I wanted to also make the women, like Sherry makes an assumption about one of them that turns out to be wrong, and it's a different one that's actually not been such a great friend. And but I don't know.
Revealed at the end who was doing
at the end,
what, and I love that. And like I said, this is a book that there's so many payoffs at the end, and and we're running out of time. I could talk to you for hours about this book, but I just wanted to go back to how there's payoff after payoff after payoff in those last couple of chapters, and I just feel like that. And I was expecting it to feel kind of rushed, but I think you also did a nice job of there's a lot of revelations at the end, but I didn't feel as though it was rushed, and that could have easily happened. And so I thought you did a nice job with that. And I think maybe the dual timeline kind of helped you get there as well. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. It felt like I remember I helped to write short stories before I wrote a book, because I think when you write short stories, one of the things you learn is that your story can end when the dramatic possibilities have reached all their conclusions. You want the reader to have a feeling that the story's still happening off the page, but that all the dramatic questions at the beginning have been answered. I'm really baffled by this trend away from prologues, like people saying like, oh, you don't need a prologue, you shouldn't have one. I kind of feel like the prologue in Shoulder Season, and also in my first book, both books have prologues. They raise dramatic questions, and it's really fun, I think, to get to the end and then go back to that prologue and see how that narrative was being seeded for the reader. And so I felt like when I went back to the prologue and I got to the end of the book, I was going to write more. And then I was like, I think actually everything I wanted to explore and every dramatic question has reached a conclusion that's at least interesting to pursue. And if I kept going, it wouldn't be interesting. It would just, I think the book would have listed a little bit. So, but it's really hard to end a book. And it's kind of nice if people don't like they think an end is rushed, because usually it means they want to spend more time in the story. So that's good,
Yeah.
I know we're getting close on time, but there's one scene that I want to gush on because sorry.
Well, we have time.
You know what? This is a great way to end, is on a big gush, because, and then I'm going to talk about how to get the book.
Towards the end of the book, when she goes back to East Troy to visit, there is a scene where she is standing on the town common looking at her town and how different it is after 40 years. And I grew up in a town very much like East Troy. And if you go back now, I mean, I have gone back because I had, for funerals and whatever, and you look and things that used to be there are gone. Like there's a building where we used to have the carnival. There's the pizza house we used to all hang out at is gone now. It's a general store. And you just look around and you feel this sense of loss of your childhood. Like it was like, you felt like it was always supposed to stay there. And that you really captured that moment where she's looking around and there's things missing. And I think in her mind, the way everyone does, our childhood home is stagnant. It doesn't change. And then you go back to it, you're like, wait, what do you mean life went on here too?
You feel like someone should have asked you permission. Like, you're going to turn on that building? No, you need to ask my permission first,
Right. And it's like, and you really feel the loss, even though it's a building. You feel the loss, like a little chunk of your childhood is gone again.
Yeah.
And you really caught that in that moment. And I got teary-eyed reading it because I was thinking, oh, this is just like North Adams. And it really, really hit home what it feels like to go back after 40 years and see something and realize it's not there anymore.
And that's what this book, it's marketed as a book about Playboy, but for me, it's really a book about place. And it's a love letter to East Troy, because I just think East Troy is the most like exceptional, special place, and it has its problems. And I don't love every single thing about it, but I think it's a really rare, unique place. And people just write off, especially on the coast, you get a sense that people write off Wisconsin, and especially farm life, like anything that, if you mention a farm, people automatically think that it's going to be boring. And,
I had somebody say, cows to me just aren't riveting, Renee. Don't write about a farm. Cows aren't riveting.
It is. It's so funny. One of the reasons I wanted to write this book, this is kind of funny, but did you ever watch The Bachelor, where Chris Soules was the Bachelor and all the ladies went to Iowa? And they literally played horror music in the background as a soundtrack for the women going to Iowa. And I was like, Iowa's beautiful. Like I've driven through parts of Iowa, like probably right where they are. And why are we always representing Middle America as a more exciting person's idea of hell? And I just was like, I wanted to redeem
You did an excellent job.
Yeah.
Or it's like a super hokey small town. And it's not.
Yeah, like where people are stupid. That's why I have Sherry play the organ, and her dad reads poetry. Like, I want to show that people, because I know people like Lorraine Nidecker is a really famous poet who's from Fort Atkinson, which is right near here. And that's part of the reason I added poetry, is because I wanted to have her dad would have known Lorraine Nidecker, and he's moved by literature, and Sherry might be stupid, but she has the emotional depth to be able to relate to music. And I was a cellist, and my daughter played the organ. So
I was going to ask you, because it was just too authentic for it to be researched. Just her understanding of music. I thought, wow, that's very authentic. I think Christy must be a musician.
Yeah, no, I loved writing the music parts of that. And one of my friends was like, why did she have to play the organ? And I'm like, well, first of all, why not?
Right.
like you were saying, as a writer, you make choices. But also,
then you turned it around with Greg Allman. I loved how you pulled that in too.
He plays the organ. So that's why, that's pretty cool that I loved researching Greg Allman. I know so much about Greg Allman. I watched all these. It's so funny when you write fiction, you do so much more research than ever makes it into your book.
Oh yeah. Rabbit holes, we call it.
Yeah. That's the best
trails.
Rabbit holes is perfect for shoulder season. Yeah.
Falling in them. All right. So I want to real quick, Christina Clancy is your you have a Facebook page, is Christina Clancy, right? Mm-hmm. And you have a website, ChristinaClancy.com.
It's actually Christy, CHRISTI.
Okay.
ClancyWrites.com. And if you Google Christina Clancy, I think it'll come up. Right.
You know what I'm going to do for our after we're done with the broadcast is I'm going to put all of the links on Step Into the Story page, so that then our listeners and viewers can just go click on that. So I'm going to do that. But Shoulder Season is available at all retail outlets. I'm sure Amazon.com.
It's at Target too. Target has it on display.
Target. I did see it in Target. Barnes and Noble has it.
Definitely Barnes and Noble. Although I think our copies have sold out, but
yeah, that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. Wonderful book. People really should pick it up. It's a different kind of read. It's not a beach read, but it is not a slow read. It's a
fast read. And it goes back to the theme that Barb and I have seemed to be having with the books that we have been reviewing, is it has a literary feel, but it has a little bit more of a genre pace. So it's a good fast read without it being cumbersome. So highly recommend. Highly recommend. 5 stars.
You guys are the best. I can't wait to read your books.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Right. And thanks, Annie, for connecting us. And I hope Annie feels better.
Yes. And we hope you'll come back when your next book's out.
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks for having me. Thanks for all your
absolutely will invite you back.
Oh, great.